Before that, Archive on 4 enters Innerspace as writer Will Self celebrates the extraordinary imagination and work of the Shepperton surrealist J G Ballard, who died earlier this year. In Self on Ballard, we hear extracts from the writer famed for his work containing strong images of sex, violence, and a disturbing and dystopian future.
No, I'm deeply moral. I'm on a one-man safari, pushing through the jungle.
He'd almost ceased to breathe. Here, at the centre of the space ground, he could feel time rapidly engorging itself. The infinite pasts and future of the forest had fused together. A jewelled snake hung from a bough, gathering to it all the embroidered skins it had once shed.
You don't have to stay here. You just climb into my sleeping cylinder, and you can be free.
Free? What does that mean? Neither of us is free. This is our world, and these are our people.
If we're going to be truthful about our real natures, and that we are other violent creatures who enjoy violence, it might be necessary to administer small doses of not just violence, but of psychopathic behavior. Very small doses, rather like the very small doses of strychnine in a nerve tonic. They stimulate the system.
Wilder helped himself to the last of the small cat that had been barbecued above the fire. His teeth pulled at the stringy meat, the still warm fat almost intoxicating him as he sucked at the skewer.
Sitting together, we were washed by the light flowing in every direction across the landscape. Together, we showed our wounds to each other, exposing the scars on our chests and hands to the beckoning injury sites on the interior of the car. In our wounds, we celebrated the rebirth of the traffic-slain dead, the deaths and injuries of those we had seen dying by the roadside, and the imaginary wounds and postures of the millions yet to die.
I've prophesied many times in interviews and so on that, I saw the future as a sort of vast, endless suburb of boredom, interrupted by acts of totally unpredictable violence.
Caliban, asleep across a mirror smeared with vomit.
It should be a very interesting experiment.
What experiment, Abram? What is the object?
To wipe out all your memories of Earth. Your knowledge of outside. That there is anything outside.
I wish you were here. It's a world the surrealists might have invented.
Some lines from Ballard's 1982 story, Myths of the Near Future. His unique perspective was also of a world the surrealists might have invented, a world in which time was rapidly engorging itself. The strangest thing, though, was that this world and our own world converged throughout the writer's life, almost as if Ballard himself were a hierophantic figure, a drowned butterfly opening his harlequin wings. He may have settled on the privet, but he was always an alien species.
I think I've spent all my life looking forward to being shipwrecked on a desert island. To some extent, it's a sort of extended version of the situation in which I find myself now. I'm sort of marooned on the British Isles, and I've lived like a castaway. Many people would say, looking at my ramshackle home, I've lived like a castaway all these years. I'd enjoy it very much.
So there you are, on the island, and you've got the wind-up gramophone, and you turn the handle hard, and you put the first record on it. What is it?
I like the Teddy Bear's Picnic. When I was a small child in Shanghai in the 1930s, I was given a wind-up gramophone of a kind that most people have never seen. No electric wires, you just turned a little handle and out came this creaky but magical sound. And I had one record, the Teddy Bear's Picnic, which I played hundreds of times, so much that when I was in my 20s and 30s, I detested it. I couldn't bear hear it. The curious thing is, about 10 years ago, I began to like it again. And now I can hear it forever.
If you go down in the woods today, you're sure of a big surprise. If you go down in the woods today, you better go in disguise. For every bear that ever there was will gather there for certain, because today's the day that teddy bears have their picnic.
Beneath the trees where nobody sees, they hide and seek as much as they please. The superficially innocuous but deeply creepy words of Teddy Bear's Picnic remain the perfect introduction to the sylvan world of the writer, J G Ballard, who died in April of this year. He lived for almost half a century in the effortlessly dull Surrey dormitory town of Shepperton, cultivated a superficially innocuous public image. But beneath the suburban groves of silver birch and ash, there lay a jungle of the id, teeming with minatory premonitions of a future in which, according to Ballard, we would be visited with the nightmare marriage of sex, death, and technology, with the mass media acting as efficient. The writer began mapping this overlit realm when he moved to Shepperton in 1960. Some might say that we all now inhabit it. The autobiographical novel Empire of the Sun, which was published, fittingly, in 1984, brought Ballard a much wider readership. It was filmed by Steven Spielberg, and in one scene of a pre-war cocktail party at his own parents' house in Shanghai, Ballard himself makes an appearance as a guest, visiting his own past. Ballard said that until he wrote Empire, he had no real idea where the Gothic furniture of his early apocalyptic writings came from, that he had suppressed his memories of the death and destruction he had witnessed as a boy in China under the Japanese occupation. However, in the last 3 decades of Ballard's life, the infinite pasts and futures of the forest had indeed fused together. For those of you who are not well acquainted with Ballard's literary oeuvre, the extensive newspaper coverage following his death may have been perplexing. Here was someone who began as a genre writer, churning out sci-fi stories for New Worlds magazine, then went on in the late 1960s to produce such shocking and genuinely avant-garde works as The Atrocity Exhibition, the subject of an obscenity trial at which the publisher's lawyer was unable to call the writer as a witness because Ballard agreed wholeheartedly that the work was, in fact and intentionally, obscene. Yet this same man was now being hailed as possibly England's most significant and influential post-war writer. How had this transformation been wrought? My view, for what it's worth, is that ingesting Ballard is, to quote his sometime friend William Burroughs's most infamous novel title, always a naked lunch. And if there's one thing the British don't like, it's seeing what's on the end of their forks. Ballard underwent that potentially deadening transformation into being an adjectival form during his own lifetime. My dictionary defines Ballardian as resembling or suggestive of the conditions described in Ballard's novels and stories, especially dystopian modernity, bleak man-made landscapes, and the psychological effects of technological, social, or environmental developments. However, it wasn't until the man himself was safely out of the way that we were able to recognize the sheer, penetrating power of his vision, at once prophetic and playfully ironic, the philosophic range of his thought, nor the passionate intensity and even beauty of his prose. It was Ballard himself who said, "For a writer, death is always a career move." For James Graham Ballard, the career move has been to a position of fully acknowledged greatness.
I have been to a number of malls, particularly in America. The one that's really inspired is where you find at this very moment the 3 giant teddy bears who move to music. And there's something very unsettling to watch the huge crowd in the atrium swaying to the rhythm of these bears, I mean, as if they're hypnotized by them. And I noticed sometimes when I've been there, I find that my head sways too. So I'm not in any way superior to the rest of the consumers. I'm one of them.
Ballard, in a late interview, talking about the real-life inspiration for the shopping mall in his final 2007 novel, Kingdom Come. In this amorality tale, the writer returned to a schema that had morphed through many of his narratives. A hermetically sealed social system, whether a shopping mall, housing development or resort colony, becomes cut off from the outside world, and its inhabitants almost joyfully ascend into savagery and barbarism.